what we'll do for the next few slides is look at some quotes from primary documents of this period to understand how individuals at this time talked about the American-Philippine War, and to evaluate the question, do we think that Larry Schweikart has given us an accurate description, and should this be described as a Christian policy? In an editorial in the New York Herald in 1900, Mark Twain, as president of the Anti-Imperialist League, wrote, "I left these shores at Vancouver a red-hot imperialist. I wanted the American eagle to go screaming into the Pacific. Why not spread its wings over the Philippines, I asked myself. I said to myself, here are people who have suffered for 3 centuries. We can make them as free as ourselves, give them a government and country of their own, put a miniature of the American Constitution afloat in the Pacific, start a brand new republic to take its place among the free nations of the world. It seemed to me a great task to which we had addressed ourselves. But I have thought some more since then, and I have read carefully the Treaty of Paris. I have seen that we do not intend to free, but to subjugate the people of the Philippines. We have gone there to conquer, not to redeem. It should, it seems to me, be our pleasure and duty to make those people free, and let them deal with their own domestic questions in their own way. And so, I am an anti-imperialist. I am opposed to having the eagle put its talons on any other land." This is Mark Twain essentially saying, when he first read the news reports about things going on in the Philippines, and he only just trusted that media, that yeah, he bought into it and he supported because he thought we were there in the Philippines to make them free. But when he started his own investigation into the details of things, he realized that the official story about the Philippines was not lining up with the reality. To understand the controversies surrounding this war, we need to look at the statements that President McKinley made at the time to defend his policies there in the Philippines. In an article with the Christian Inquirer published in the year 1900, President McKinley stated, quote, "I walked the floor of the White House night after night until midnight, and I'm not ashamed to tell you, gentlemen, that I went down on my knees and prayed Almighty God for light and guidance more than one night. And one night late, it came to me this way. I don't know how it was, but it came." If we pause right there, President McKinley is trying to say that his foreign policy in the Philippines is a product of divine intervention, and that God himself has assisted McKinley in these decisions. And if we look critically now at the policies that McKinley lays out, let's ask ourselves, is this what Jesus would do? Number 1, that we could not give them back to Spain. That would be cowardly and dishonorable. I'm quite sure that most of Matthew and Mark are about thou shalt not be a coward or dishonor your nation. Number 2, that we could not turn them over to France and Germany, our commercial rivals in the Orient. That would be bad business and discreditable. I'm pretty sure that the book of Acts, that's about good business practice and not discrediting your investors globally. Number 3, that we could not leave them to themselves, for they were unfit for self-government, and they would soon have anarchy and misrule over there, worse than Spain's was. And then number 4, there was nothing left for us to do but to take them all and to educate the Filipinos and uplift and civilize and Christianize them, and by God's grace do the very best we could by them, as our fellow men for whom Christ also died. And then I went to bed and went to sleep and slept soundly. And the next morning I sent for the chief engineer of the War Department, and I told him to put the Philippines on the map of the United States. And there they are, and there they will stay while I am president. I'm not sure what the details on that, if it's fair to qualify and say that this policy comes from divine intervention and inspiration. If we look at a quote here from Sergeant Major Lewis Douglas, who was the son of the famous Frederick Douglass of the American Civil War. As a member of the American Armed Forces, Douglas called out the Commander-in-Chief and critiqued his policies, stating publicly, quote, "President McKinley, in the course of his speech at Minneapolis, said of the Filipinos under American sovereignty, quote, They will not be governed as vassals or serfs or slaves. They will be given a government of liberty, regulated by law, honestly administered, without oppressing exaction, taxation without tyranny, justice without bribe, education without distinction of social conditions, freedom of religious worship, and protection of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." End quote. It is a sorry though true fact that whatever this government controls, injustice to dark races prevails. The people of Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Manila know it, as well as the wronged Indian and outraged black man of the United States. It is hypocrisy of the most sickening kind to try and make us believe that the killing of Filipinos is for the purpose of good government and to give protection to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What is unique about studying the American-Philippine War is there was so much mainstream public outcry about what was going on there that the U.S. Senate Armed Forces Committee decided to investigate in order to clear things up in the public mind. What the Senate Forces Committee did was they brought in a number of commanders from American military to discuss exactly what happened in the Philippines. And many of the reactions were quite horrifying. This first quote is a paraphrase of General Jacob H. Smith. This paraphrase came from one of his subordinates who one day asked General Smith what the soldiers' orders were for that particular mission. And General Smith replied, "I want no prisoners. I want you to kill and burn. The more you kill and burn, the better it will please me. I want all persons killed who are capable of bearing arms in actual hostilities against the United States." When his subordinate asked for clarifications on who should be considered capable of bearing arms, General Smith replied, "Any Filipino age 14 or older." Colonel Funston, very arrogantly in his testimony to the committee, stated, quote, "I personally strung up 35 Filipinos. Impromptu domestic caning might hasten the end of the war. For starters, all Americans who recently petitioned Congress to sue for peace in the Philippines should be dragged out of their homes and lynched." This is Colonel Funston saying, "Yeah, I strung up people. And if I was allowed to string up more Filipinos, I could bring an end to this war by striking terror into them. And that anyone who has critiqued this war here in the United States is unpatriotic, and that people like Mark Twain should be dragged out of his home and lynched for critiquing American policy." Perhaps the most horrifying of all the testimony on this day was from General William Shafter, who said, "It may be necessary to kill half the Filipinos in order that the remaining half of the population may be advanced to a higher plane of life than their present semi-barbarous state affords." Now, if President McKinley says that his policy is inspired by divine inspiration, I don't remember anywhere in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John where Jesus said, "Thou shalt kill half the population so that the other half can be saved."